who else would like to make a point from the room? There may be stakeholders in the room who have not been fully represented on the podium, and please do seize this opportunity as well. Let's start here.
I have to congratulate the initiative takers with the report they presented, but what I didn't see, what I didn't hear is the aspect of energy saving. Energy production is one thing, using different energy sources is another, but energy saving is at least as important, perhaps even more important. And I just wonder whether in the report also this aspect has been looked after. Has there been some research on that part of the energy problem?
Right, and before giving the floor to Anne, who will certainly address this issue very briefly, let me point also to the last session of this event, where we have Adrian Joyce. Are you here, Adrian? Not yet. Who represents the architects, basically, and the renovation industry, which will also address your point. But first of all, your view on that saving.
Okay. In the report, we didn't do any quantification of that opportunity, although there clearly is an opportunity for energy savings. But what we did do in the main report, the full report, there are the views of the experts from each country, which is a sort of anecdotal description of the kind of savings you can get, but there wasn't a quantification in this study because that wasn't part of the remit of the study.
And you put a question, but why don't you also mention your affiliation and perhaps your view on the topic?
My name is Bart Vleeshouwers. I'm from Belgium and I'm working for the Farmers Union here.
And do you have a view on this?
Well, I think that the most interesting kilowatt that you can have, or joule, or however you want to express it, is the one that you haven't used. So I think that when policies are being developed, it's not only on what fuel to use, but also how to avoid the use in the beginning. And that's, I think that a lot of energy, then imaginative energy has to be put on that subject, I think, and there is a lot of gain to find there.
I'm sure nobody will disagree. In fact, Andrew, if I'm correct, in the free initiative, there are members who represent the industry of insulation and other relevant materials, correct?
Yes. Firstly, the point about energy saving, we were at an energy seminar a year or so ago, and someone from the Commission, I think, said, everyone says there is no magic bullet to the energy crisis. And he said there is, and it's energy saving, because he put that at the very top of the list. So we do, in the free initiative, we completely agree with you in terms of part of that solution. The report, as Anne said, was there to diagnose and to measure the problem. We now then have a job to promote good, practical energy-saving measures. And we're very pleased, for instance, in the housing stock, for rural housing stock, it's not always possible to do this insulation, as I said before. So one of our early partners was Glass for Europe, because if you have the right glass in the property, you can actually make significant savings without actually changing the fabric, and which is quite important, the look and feel of the property.
Right. I'd like to invite a couple more contributions from the room. But before doing so, let me warn Jonathan and Marie that I will then ask them a question, namely, what has surprised them most in this report? Because you both came with a set presentation from your perspective, the mountain areas and the east of England region. What did you learn from this report that is surprising to you, and what will you take back home that could be relevant for policymakers? But let's see who else has something to say or some question to put in the room. Nobody daring yet? So, The floor is yours, Jonathan. Just one point that you will remember.
I will just mention the energy efficiency issue that the gentleman raised, because I would have mentioned it had I had more time. But we also are focusing on energy efficiency in housing, and we put a substantial amount of our regional development fund, our European Regional Development Fund, into a initiative called Go Warm, where people, normally vulnerable people, but also working families, can have their homes inspected and then have subsidised solar panels, heat water pumps put in. So we absolutely agree, and what's coming out now from the Commission in terms of energy efficiency of public buildings is also very important. So we absolutely agree with all of that. In answer to your question, for us, energy poverty, or fuel poverty, as we call it in the UK, is the single biggest issue. We are a very prosperous region, but we have significant pockets of deprivation. In fact, in the most recent UK government deprivation study for England, the East of England has the single poorest, most deprived ward in the whole of England, as well as having the most prosperous. But the rural areas are the ones, and our coastal towns particularly, rural coastal towns particularly, suffer significantly from fuel poverty. And anything that we can do at a European and national level is incredibly important for what we're doing.
And one challenge from a policy viewpoint, and maybe there will be views about that in the room, is to bring more fuel to those areas, but without increasing the overall energy consumption in Europe and without worsening the climate change situation. So it's a dilemma now where I'd like to hear some views. But Marie, from your perspective, what struck you most?
Well, what strikes me in the report is the differences we can see from one country to another, which showed again, according to me, that sustainable solutions have to be tailor-made according to the current energy mix in the places. And polluting solutions are easy to set up. They can be the same for every country. But adapted sustainable solutions have to be thought about carefully in every place, so that there is something adapted to the current case, to the current energy mix, to the current possibilities everywhere in every country. For me, that was the most striking thing when I had a look at the report.
You know that sitting in Brussels, it's quite difficult to conceive policies which have to be very different from country to country and from region to region. That's not what the EU is very good at. So what does it mean in terms of EU policy making?
Well, that's a good question, but still, EU has some means to support the implementation of adapted policies locally. So it's just like what the MEP, sorry, I forgot his name, was mentioning earlier, that there's this fund which is to use up to 7% in every region, to 7% of regional fund in everywhere, to develop new renewable energy solutions. Then this fund is not used yet, or not fully used everywhere. Well, then this is a solution which is decided at EU level, but then which can be adapted locally. So for me, there are solutions, even though those solutions have to be adapted in every places.
So there are some broad policy priorities which do apply at European level, and I'm sure Gerhard Stahl in a couple of minutes will address them, knowing the complexity of gathering all these different regions around a few topics. But before giving him the floor, I'd like to know if there are others who have a view and who would like to share it or to put a question in the room. Yes, please, the gentleman in the back. I know you, but others don't. Please mention your affiliation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Niels Schreuder. I represent Glass for Europe today. Looking at the slides and hearing the questions already, I would just like to throw something in the debate to the panelists. We know that the European Commission at EU level has enlarged the scope of the Energy Labeling Directive last year. And just as a measure to bring making energy efficiency a priority, I would like to ask the panelists if asking for priority for a label on all those products that help making housing and rural areas more energy efficient could be a recommendation from the free movement after this day, so that energy labels for rural areas would be given more attention. What do you think?
And I would add as a sub-question, should it be a specific rural energy type label, or should it apply in general? Maybe we can have brief answers from Marie down to on this side on these two questions. Should there be a label on energy efficiency, and secondly, should it be rural specific?
Well, from Euromontana's point of view, energy saving, energy efficiency should be a priority. It's one of the recommendations we have already in our position paper. So, of course, it should be also a recommendation for rural areas, and not only to rural areas, but everywhere, because it's the easiest way to pollute less.
So, Jonathan?
Well, I don't think anyone can really disagree with highlighting products and items which are energy efficient and which are going to save you money in the long term. Whether it needs to be specifically for a rural area, I'm not sure. I mean, we have a system in the east of England where those who are part of our Go Warm Renewables East strategy, we provide them with a label, which used to come from our development agency. So it wasn't a rural specific label, but I can see the argument for it. But I mean, I don't know whether it has to be for just a rural area, though.
Andrew, you have the same answer?
Broadly, I agree, but I would reflect that when we started this, we had this dream that perhaps what we did need was a rural energy policy or a rural energy strategy, and something that did address the specific and increased needs in many cases of rural people. I do agree with the fuel poverty, by the way, and this could actually damage any initiative if this was to increase, and that needs managing. I don't think that a rural energy policy actually is the answer. I think sensible interventions within the Energy Efficiency Directive that recognises and are an enabling power for rural citizens, if they're well funded and managed, would be good enough.
Well, we'll certainly discuss that again in the last session and the last Q&A session. To what extent should these policies for energy efficiency and renewable energy and so on be specific to rural areas or not? But before that, Anne, a short answer on the previous question.
I agree with the rest of the panelists. I think energy labels are part of a package of an overall package of an energy policy. I don't see that there should be a separate rural and urban label, but maybe some of the equipment that you use in purely rural areas are neglected because it's a smaller proportion of the equipment sold altogether. So there may be specific products that are used mainly in rural areas that would benefit from a label, but it shouldn't be a rural label.